Houthis demand civil service salaries before starting any political talks. Displaced people in Yemen continue to suffer amid cuts of international aid. Houthi blockade on Taiz aggravates civilians' suffering. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Shaza Abdelbey. By the coming of the new year, hopes for peace in Yemen were pinned on Houthi return to the negotiating table. The rebels, however, are still blocking every chance to settle the conflict with difficult preconditions. This report has more details.
Iran-backed Houthi rebels have reiterated their demand that a wage issue with Yemen's government be settled before they commit to a permanent truce. The rebels indicated that they are attempting to reach a point in Yemen where a truce or a permanent ceasefire may be established. Attempts to relaunch peace talks with the Houthis and the Yemeni government have faltered in recent months, with civil servant pay posing a major hurdle. The rebel group stipulated that any solution must be based on disbursing employee salaries from oil and gas revenues. This happened as Yemen's government confirmed its promise to pay salaries. Other Houthi demands include the reopening of the airports and highways in Sana'a. Despite the relative peace, a resumption to full-scale conflict remains a possibility in the absence of a formal agreement to end the hostilities. Both sides of the military equation have reached a point of exhaustion and are not eager to resume military operations. Yemen's civil war began when the Houthis took control of the capital Sana'a and much of the country's northern regions, forcing the Yemeni government into exile. At the urging of the Yemeni government, a Saudi-led coalition intervened in early 2015. At the start of Ramadan last April, both sides agreed to a 2-month ceasefire. It was later extended 3 times, but efforts to prolong it beyond October fell through. The new Houthi remarks come only hours after the Yemeni president, Rashad al-Alimi, reaffirmed his country's commitment to working with foreign allies to resolve the war. On Twitter, Alimi underlined his commitment to alleviate human suffering, including regular payment of wages for civilian and military troops, diplomatic mission, the United Nations. Over 4 million people have been displaced, and 15.6 million have plunged into severe poverty.
3 international organizations confirmed the worsening of the humanitarian situation in Yemen as a result of the continuation of the war. It stated that more than 3/4 of the displaced are unable to provide rent for the houses in which they live, and that more than 7 million people live in poor housing. This report has more details.
3 UN organizations confirmed the exacerbation of the humanitarian situation in the country as a result of the continuation of the war, and stated that more than 3/4 of the displaced are unable to provide rent for the homes where they live, and that more than 7 million people live in inadequate housing and without household appliances. Reports shared by the United Nations Office for Humanitarian Affairs, the World Food Programme, and the United Nations Population Fund confirmed that displacement, poverty, disruption of livelihoods, and access to public services need durable solutions to the conflict. According to these reports, the Shelter and Non-Food Items Cluster estimated that there are 7.5 million people living without basic household items, and this amount is expected to increase by 2% every year. A recent study also has shown that the needs for shelter have increased significantly, with more than 5.3 million people facing acute needs in this aspect, and asserted that the internally displaced face countless challenges. According to these UN data, among the 4.5 million displaced people, at least 25% of them have been displaced twice or more, while more than 2/3 of the displaced people live in rented accommodation or hosting places. And 82% of the displaced people reported internally, and those interviewed, about serious difficulties they face in paying the rent, while about 76% stated that they hadn't paid the rent for more than 3 months, which increases the risk of evacuation, especially for low-income families who are less able to meet basic needs. With these reports anticipating a continued deterioration in the economic situation of the families, they confirmed that Access to basic household items at affordable prices remains a challenge for low-income families, as about 81% of the affected population reported that they don't have minimum amount of household items, while 38% restore.
A Houthi drone bombed sites belonging to the joint forces in Muris area, north of Al-Dala. In addition, military sources stated that the Houthi drones targeted the administration building of the Sector 5, a security belt which resulted in the injury of the commander of the 5th sector and a number of soldiers. The security belt forces announced the launch of the second phase of operation in Abyan. The first phase was launched at the beginning of last year and succeeded in clearing large places of Abyan from the terrorist organization. This report has more details.
A new wave of fighting erupted between Yemen's government forces and the Houthi rebel militia in various areas within the past 24 hours. Military sources confirmed that scores of Houthi rebel gunmen carried out a large-scale attack and made an attempt to penetrate into the positions of the Southern Transitional Council troops in the northern western areas of the country's southern province of Al-Dala. Military sources confirmed that scores of Houthi rebel gunmen carried out a large-scale attack and made an attempt to penetrate into the positions of the Southern Transitional Council troops in the northwestern areas of the country's southern province of Al-Dala. The military source based in Dala said that STC's troops, backed by Saudi-led coalition, thwarted the Houthis' attack following several hours of ferocious battles. The battles are still going on. 7 soldiers as well as 13 Houthi rebel gunmen were confirmed to have been killed so far, the source added. According to the official, during the past several hours, STC's troops dispatched elite military units to join the fighting against the Houthis in Dala. Meanwhile, an official of the Yemeni government, nations and regional countries, especially the United Arab Emirates, to renew a humanitarian truce that seeks to end hostilities in the Arab world's poorest country. Yemen has been marred in a civil war since late 2014.
وإن كان يجي الأمطار تروح هدر لأنه ما في محيا غزة.
الوقت نشتري ب 30,000 هي مع هستلك ما يغلقش معها الشهر.
بس راح تطلب الله ولا أي حاجة عاملة كل شغلك على الماء.
Welcome back. Children with brainy palsy in Ma'rib lack specialized centers and suffer from difficulty in obtaining complete health care. This report has more details.
The war has not only affected children on the ground, but also affected the wombs of their mothers before they even come to life. Children with cerebral palsy are living in a world full of pain and suffering. They face a difficult life because of the disease that gripped their small bodies and weakened their movement and robbed them their childhood. Some of them lost the ability to speak, a tragedy added to the suffering of their families who are searching for medicine for their children. In light of the deteriorating health conditions in Ma'rib Governorate and the lack of specialized centers for the treatment of cerebral palsy among children.
My son has been suffering from cerebral palsy for 4 years now. He needs a lot of medications and sessions that we can't afford, and it's so hard to find such services here in the area. No one is willing to help us during this hard time. He needs to have daily training and physiotherapy sessions. not once or twice per week.
Hundreds of children with cerebral palsy visit the only physiotherapy center in Ma'rib, dedicated to rehabilitating the war wounded, to obtain 2 hours of rehabilitation per week. While these children need daily training and rehabilitation in all functional and movement aspects, as the disease is ravaging the bodies of these children, meanwhile the health office in Ma'rib ignores them.
Children suffering from cerebral palsy need special treatments and daily sessions that we can't provide here in the center, as our resources are very limited. They also need special supplies that help them develop and improve their mental and physical abilities, in addition to occupational qualifications that we don't provide as well.
Due to the large numbers of patients suffering from cerebral palsy, we try to exert an effort and provide a good service for these children to help them overcome their disability. We appeal to the local authorities, the health office, and the humanitarian organizations to provide and expand a special section for children to complete the rehabilitation process.
The deterioration of the health sector due to the war, in addition to the Ministry of Health and its offices ignoring this segment, led to the spread of the disease and an increase in the number of children with cerebral palsy. As a result of the lack of health care for children infected in the first stage of the disease. According to the physiotherapy center in Ma'rib, the number of cases reported at the center has exceeded 600 cases, while the center is unable to provide full care and receive all these cases.
Yemeni human rights sources revealed that Asma al-Umaisi and other detainees in prisons of the Houthi militia are in danger with physical liquidation. In addition, they confirmed that Asma, who has been detained in Houthi prisons in the capital Sana'a since September 2016, is in a poor health condition as a result of her suffering from many diseases. Her lawyer warned that she and a number of other female detainees are being subjected to inhumane treatment in Houthi prisons. Yemeni people have seen terrible conditions since the Houthi coup in 2014. The violations of the Houthi rebels against detainees are one shape, for which the rebels must be held accountable and be labeled as terrorists. This report has more details.
The Yemeni Abductees Mothers Association has accused the Houthi rebels of using the prisoners and abductees issue as a bargaining chip for political gains, calling for the release of all detainees without condition. The head of the association repeated the call to end the suffering of their sons and daughters in the Houthi prisons, saying that some of them have spent more than 7 years in captivity. She added that the prisoners' exchange file is still pending between the various parties and the United Nations Envoy Office, and every once in a while the mothers hear the Houthis and the government exchange accusations about its delay, while the victims and their families are suffering greatly. The appeal comes days after the Yemeni government and the Houthis exchanged accusations about who was obstructing the prisoners' exchange in accordance with the Stockholm Agreement concluded in 2018. The head of the Houthi Prisoners Committee accused the Yemeni government and Saudi Arabia of deliberately obstructing the prisoners' exchange deal. The Yemeni government responded to the Houthi accusations by confirming its readiness to end the standstill of prisoners and abductees file. The prisoners and abductees file is one of the outstanding issues between the government and the Houthi rebels. Yemen has been marred in a civil war since late 2014, when the Iran-backed Houthi militia stormed several northern cities and forced the Yemeni government out of the capital Sana'a. The war has killed tens of thousands of people, displaced 4 million, and brought the country to the brink of starvation.
Here is a reminder of the main headlines. Houthis demand civil service salaries before starting any political talks. Displaced people in Yemen continue to suffer amid cuts of international aid. Houthi blockade on Taz aggravates civilians' suffering. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.